We thought of keeping the trial private, but Oxenford has suggested to Chappell that he would like to take the opportunity of tomorrow night's reading of saying something about Oliver in Wednesday's paper. Chappell has told Levy of this, and also Mr. Tompkin of the Post, who was there. Consequently, on Wednesday evening, your charming article can come out to the best advantage. You have no idea of the difficulty of getting in the end of Sykes. As to the man with the invaluable composition, my dear fellow, believe me, no audience on earth could be held for 10 minutes after the girl's death. Give them time, and they would be revengeful for having had such a strain put upon them. Trust me to be right. I stand there, and I know. Concerning Harry, I like to guide the boys to a distinct choice, rather than to press it on them. That will be my course as to the Middle Temple, of which I think as you do. With cordial thanks for every word in your letter. Affectionately yours always, Mrs. F. Lehman. Kennedy's Hotel, Edinburgh, Sunday Deck, th. 1868. My dear Mrs. Lehman, I hope you will see Nancy with the light of a great audience upon her sometime between this and May, always supposing that she should not prove too weird and woeful for the general public. You know the aspect of this city on a Sunday, and how gay and bright it is. The merry music of the blithe bells, the waving flags, the prettily decorated houses with their draperies of various colors, and the radiant countenances at the windows and in the streets, how charming they are. The usual preparations are making for the band in the open air in the afternoon, and the usual pretty children, selected for that purpose, are at this moment hanging garlands round the Scott Monument, preparatory to the innocent Sunday dance round that edifice, with which the diversions invariably close. It is pleasant to think that these customs were themselves of the early Christians, those early birds who didn't catch the worm and nothing else, and choke their young with it. Faithfully yours always, Miss Hogarth. Kennedy's Hotel, Edinburgh, Sunday Deck, th. 1868. We got down here to our time to the moment, and, considering the length of the journey, very easily. I made a calculation on the road that the railway traveling over such a distance involves something more than 30,000 shocks to the nerves. Dolby didn't like it at all. The signals for a gale were up at Berwick and along the road between there and here. It came on just as we arrived and blew tremendously hard all night. The wind is still very high, though the sky is bright and the sun shining. We couldn't sleep for the noise. We are very comfortably quartered. I fancy that the business will be on the whole better here than in Glasgow, where trade is said to be very bad. But I think I shall be pretty correct in both places as to the run being on the final readings. We are going up Arthur's Seat presently, which will be a pull for our fat friend. Scott in a new Mephistopheles hat baffles imagination and description. Mr. W. Wilkie Collins. Kennedy's Hotel, Edinburgh, Tuesday Deck, th. 1868. My dear Wilkie, I'm hard at it here as usual, though with an audience so finely perceptive that the labor is much diminished. I have got together in a very short space the conclusion of Oliver Twist that you suggested, and am trying it daily with the object of rising from that blank state of horror into a fierce and passionate rush for the end. As yet I cannot make a certain effect of it, but when I shall have gone over it as many score of times as over the rest of that reading, perhaps I may strike one out. I shall be very glad to hear when you have done your play, and I am glad to hear that you like the steamer. I agree with you about the reading perfectly. In number 3, you will see an exact account of some places I visited at Ratcliffe. There are 2 little instances in it of something comic rising up in the midst of the direst misery that struck me very humorously at the time. As I have determined not to do the Oliver murder until after the th of January, when I shall ascertain its effect on a great audience, it is curious to notice how the shadow of its coming affects the Scotch mind. There was such a disposition to hold back for it here until I returned to finish in February that we had next to no let when we arrived. It all came with a rush yesterday. They gave me a most magnificent welcome back from America last night. I am perpetually counting the weeks before me to be read through, and am perpetually longing for the end of them. and yet I sometimes wonder whether I shall miss something when they are over. It is a very, very bad day here, very dark and very wet. Dolby is over at Glasgow, and I am sitting at a side window looking up the length of Prince's Street, watching the mist change over the castle and murdering Nancy by turns. Ever affectionately. P.S. I have read the whole of Fitzgerald's Zero, and the idea is exceedingly well wrought out. Miss Hogarth. Kennedy's Hotel, Edinburgh, Saturday Dec. Th. 1868. I send another Scotsman by this post, because it is really a good newspaper, well written and well managed. We had an immense house here last night, and a very large turnaway. We have 4 guests to dinner today: Peter Fraser, Ballantyne, John Blackwood, and Mr. Russell. Immense preparations are making in the establishment, on account, Mr. Kennedy says, of a 4 yon Cheels being Cheels wa Ken a gooid dinner. I inquired after poor Dr. Burt, not having the least idea that he was dead. My voice holds out splendidly so far, and I have had no return of the American, but I sleep very indifferently indeed. It blew appallingly here the night before last, but the wind has since shifted northward, and it is now bright and cold. The Star of Hope, that picked up those shipwrecked people in the boat, came into Leith yesterday and was received with tremendous cheers. Her captain must be a good man and a noble fellow. The same. Kennedy's Hotel, Edinburgh, Monday Dec. Th. 1868. The dinner party of Saturday last was an immense success. Russell swore on the occasion that he would go over to Belfast expressly to dine with me at the Finlays. Ballantyne informed me that he was going to send you some Scotch remembrance, I don't know what, at Christmas. The Edinburgh houses are very fine. The Glasgow room is a big wandering place, with 5 prices in it, which makes it the more aggravating, as the people get into knots which they can't break, as if they were afraid of one another. Forgery of my name is becoming popular. You sent me, this morning, a letter from Russell Sturgis, answering a supposed letter of mine, presented by Miss Jeffreys, and assuring me of his readiness to give not only the £10 I asked for, but any contribution I wanted, towards sending that lady and her family back to Boston. I wish you would take an opportunity of forewarning Lady Tennant that the first night's reading she will attend is an experiment quite out of the way, and that she may find it rather horrible. The keeper of the Edinburgh Hall, a fine old soldier, presented me, on Friday night, with the finest red camellia for my buttonhole that ever was seen. Nobody can imagine how he came by it, as the florists had had a considerable demand for that color from ladies in the stalls, and could get no such thing. The day is dark, wet, and windy. The weather is likely to be vile indeed at Glasgow, where it always rains, and where the sun is never seen through the smoke. We go over there tomorrow at 10. Miss Dickens. Carrick's Royal Hotel, Glasgow. Tuesday Dec. Th. 1868. It occurs to me that my table at St. James's Hall might be appropriately ornamented with a little holly next Tuesday. If the 2 front legs were entwined with it, for instance, and a border of it ran round the top of the fringe in front, with a little sprig by way of bouquet at each corner, it would present a seasonable appearance. If you will think of this, and will have the materials ready in a little basket, I will call for you at the office at 12:30 on Tuesday, and take you up to the hall, where the table will be ready for you. No news, except that we had a great crush and a wonderful audience in Edinburgh last night. Miss Hogarth. Carrick's Royal Hotel, Glasgow. Wednesday Dec. Th. 1868. This is to report all well, except that I have wretched nights. The weather is diabolical here, and times are very bad. I cut Copperfield with a bold dexterity that amazed myself and utterly confounded George at the wing, knocking off that and Bob by 10 minutes to 10. I don't know anything about the Liverpool banquet, except from the Times, as I don't finish there in February, as they seem to have supposed, but in April it may, perhaps, stand over or blow over altogether. Such a thing would be a serious addition to the work, and yet refusal on my part would be too ungracious. The density and darkness of this atmosphere are fearful. I shall be heartily glad to start for Edinburgh again on Friday morning. The same. Kennedy's Hotel, Edinburgh, Friday, Dec. Th. 1868. I am heartily glad to get back here this afternoon. The day is bright and cheerful, and the relief from Glasgow inexpressible. The affectionate regard of the people exceeds all bounds and is shown in every way. The manager of the railway, being at the reading the other night, wrote to me next morning, saying that a large saloon should be prepared for my journey up, if I would let him know when I purposed making the journey. On my accepting the offer, he wrote again, saying that he had inspected our northern saloons, and not finding them so convenient for sleeping in as the best English, had sent up to King's Cross for the best of the latter, which I would please consider my own carriage as long as I wanted it. The audiences do everything but embrace me and take as much pains with the readings as I do. I find your Christmas present, just arrived, to be a haggis and shortbread. Mr. J.C. Parkinson. Gad's Hill Place, Higham by Rochester, Kent. Christmas Day, 1868. My dear Parkinson, when your letter was delivered at All the Year Round office yesterday, I was attending a funeral. It comes to hand here consequently today. I am diffident of addressing Mr. Gladstone on the subject of your desire to be appointed to the vacant Commissionership of Inland Revenue, because, although my respect for him and confidence in him are second to those of no man in England, a bold word at this time, but a truthful one, my personal acquaintance with him is very slight. But you may make, through any of your friends, any use you please of this letter, towards the end of bringing its contents under Mr. Gladstone's notice. In expressing my conviction that you deserve the place, and are in every way qualified for it, I found my testimony upon as accurate a knowledge of your character and abilities as anyone can possibly have acquired. In my editorship both of Household Words and All the Year Round, you know very well that I have invariably offered you those subjects of political and social interest to write upon, in which integrity, exactness, a remarkable power of generalizing evidence and balancing facts, and a special clearness in stating the case, were indispensable on the part of the writer. My confidence in your powers has never been misplaced, and through all our literary intercourse, you have never been hasty or wrong. Whatever trust you have undertaken has been so completely discharged that it has become my habit to read your proofs rather for my own edification than, as in other cases, for the detection of some slip here or there, or the more pithy presentation of the subject. That your literary work has never interfered with the discharge of your official duties, I may assume to be at least as well known to your colleagues as it is to me. It is idle to say that if the post were in my gift you should have it, because you have had, for some years, most of the posts of high trust that have been at my disposal. An excellent public servant in your literary sphere of action, I should be heartily glad if you could have this new opportunity of distinguishing yourself in the same character. And this is at least unselfish in me, for I suppose I should then lose you. Always faithfully yours, Mr. Edward Bulwer Lytton Dickens. Letter to his youngest son on his departure for Australia in 1868. My dearest Plorn, I write this note today because your going away is much upon my mind, and because I want you to have a few parting words from me to think of now and then at quiet times. I need not tell you that I love you dearly, and am very, very sorry in my heart to part with you. But this life is half made up of partings, and these pains must be borne. It is my comfort and my sincere conviction that you are going to try the life for which you are best fitted. I think its freedom and wildness more suited to you than any experiment in a study or office would ever have been, and without that training, you could have followed no other suitable occupation. What you have already wanted, until now, has been a set, steady, constant purpose. I therefore exhort you to persevere in a thorough determination to do whatever you have to do as well as you can do it. I was not so old as you are now when I first had to win my food, and do this out of this determination, and I have never slackened in it since. Never take a mean advantage of anyone in any transaction, and never be hard upon people who are in your power. Try to do to others as you would have them do to you, and do not be discouraged if they fail sometimes. It is much better for you that they should fail in obeying the greatest rule laid down by our Savior than that you should. I put a New Testament among your books for the very same reasons and with the very same hopes that made me write an easy account of it for you when you were a little child, because it is the best book that ever was or will be known in the world, and because it teaches you the best lessons by which any human creature who tries to be truthful and faithful to duty can possibly be guided. As your brothers have gone away, one by one, I have written to each such words as I am now writing to you, and have entreated them all to guide themselves by this book, putting aside the interpretations and inventions of men. You will remember that you have never at home been wearied about religious observances or mere formalities. I have always been anxious not to weary my children with such things before they are old enough to form opinions respecting them. You will therefore understand the better that I now most solemnly impress upon you the truth and beauty of the Christian religion, as it came from Christ himself, and the impossibility of your going far wrong if you humbly but heartily respect it. Only one thing more on this head: the more we are in earnest as to feeling it, the less we are disposed to hold forth about it. Never abandon the wholesome practice of saying your own private prayers, night and morning. I have never abandoned it myself, and I know the comfort of it. I hope you will always be able to say in after life that you had a kind father. You cannot show your affection for him so well or make him so happy as by doing your duty. Your affectionate father. 1869. Narrative. The farewell readings in town and country were resumed immediately after the beginning of this year, and were to have been continued until the end of May. The work was even harder than it had ever been. Charles Dickens began his country tour in Ireland early in January, and read continuously in all parts of England and Scotland until the end of April. A public dinner, in commemoration of his last readings in the town, was given to him at Liverpool on the April. Besides all this severe country work, he was giving a series of readings at St. James's Hall and reading The Murder from Oliver Twist in London and in the country, frequently 4 times a week. In the second week of February, a sudden and unusually violent attack of the old trouble in his foot made it imperatively necessary to postpone a reading at St. James's Hall and to delay for a day or two his departure for Scotland. The foot continued to cause him pain and inconvenience, but, as will be seen from his letters, he generally spoke of himself as otherwise well until he arrived at Preston, where he was to read on the ND of April. The day before this appointed reading, he writes home of some grave symptoms which he had observed in himself, and had reported to his doctor, Mr. F. Carr Beard. That gentleman, taking alarm at what he considered indisputable evidences of overwork, wisely resolved not to content himself with written consultations, but went down to Preston on the day appointed for the reading there, and after seeing his patient, peremptorily stopped it, carried him off to Liverpool, and the next day to London. There he consulted Sir Thomas Watson, who entirely corroborated Mr. Beard's opinion, and the 2 doctors agreed that the course of readings must be stopped for this year, and that reading, combined with travelling, must be stopped forever. Charles Dickens had no alternative but to acquiesce in this verdict, but he felt it keenly, not only for himself, but for the sake of the Messrs. Chappell, who showed the most disinterested kindness and solicitude on the occasion. He at once returned home to Gad's Hill, and the rest and quiet of the country restored him, for the time, to almost his usual condition of health and spirits. But it was observed, by all who loved him, that from this time forth he never regained his old vigor and elasticity. The attack at Preston was the beginning of the end. During the spring and summer of this year, he received visits from many dearly valued American friends. In May, he stayed with his daughter and sister-in-law for 2 or 3 weeks at the St. James's Hotel, Piccadilly, having promised to be in London at the time of the arrival of Mr. and Mrs. Fields of Boston, who visited Europe, accompanied by Miss Mabel Lowell, the daughter of the famous American poet, this year. Besides these friends, Mr. and Mrs. Childs of Philadelphia, from whom he had received the greatest kindness and hospitality, and for whom he had a hearty regard, Dr. Fordyce Barker and his son, Mr. Eitinge, an illustrator of an American edition of Charles Dickens's works, and Mr. Bayard Taylor paid visits to Gad's Hill, which were thoroughly enjoyed by Charles Dickens and his family. This last summer was a very happy one. He had the annual summer visitors and parties of his friends in the neighborhood. He was, as usual, projecting improvements in his beloved country home. One, which he called the crowning improvement of all, was a large conservatory, which was to be added during the absence of the family in London in the following spring. The state of Mr. Will's health made it necessary for him now to retire altogether from the editorship of All the Year Round. Charles Dickens's own letters expressed the regret which he felt at the dissolution of this long and always pleasant association. Mr. Will's place at the office was filled by Charles Dickens's eldest son, now sole editor and proprietor of the journal. In September, Charles Dickens went to Birmingham, accompanied by his son Harry, and presided at the opening of the session of what he calls in his letter to Mr. Arthur Ryland, our institution, the Midland Institute. He made a speech on education to the young students and promised to go back early in the following year and distribute the prizes. In one of the letters which we give to Mr. Ryland, he speaks of himself as being in full force again and going to finish his farewell readings soon after Christmas. He had obtained the sanction of Sir Thomas Watson to giving 12 readings in London only, which he had fixed for the beginning of the following year. The letter to his friend Mr. Finlay, which opens the year, was in reply to a proposal for a public banquet at Belfast, projected by the mayor of that town and conveyed through Mr. Finlay. This gentleman was at that time proprietor of the Northern Whig newspaper at Belfast, and he was son-in-law to Mr. Alexander Russell, editor of the Scotsman. Charles Dickens's letter this new year to M. de Surjat was his last. That faithful and affectionate friend died very shortly afterwards. To Miss Mary Boyle, he writes to acknowledge a New Year's gift, which he had been much touched by receiving from her, at a time when he knew she was deeply afflicted by the sudden death of her brother, Captain Cavendish Boyle, for whom Charles Dickens had a true regard and friendship. While he was giving his series of London readings in the spring, he received a numerously signed circular letter from actors and actresses of the various London theatres. They were very curious about his new reading of the Oliver Twist murder, and representing to him the impossibility of their attending an evening, requested him to give a morning reading for their especial benefit. We give his answer, complying with the request, and the occasion was, to him, a most gratifying and deeply interesting one. The letter to Mr. Edmund Ollier was in answer to an invitation to be present at the inauguration of a bust of Mr. Leigh Hunt, which was to be placed over his grave at Kensal Green. The letter to Mr. Shirley Brooks, the well-known writer, who succeeded Mr. Mark Lemon as editor of Punch, and for whom Charles Dickens had a cordial regard, was on the subject of a memorial on behalf of Mrs. Peter Cunningham, whose husband had recently died. The remarkable story, of which he writes to his daughter in August, was called An Experience. It was written by a lady who prefers to be anonymous, who had been a contributor to Household Words from its first starting, and was always highly valued in this capacity by Charles Dickens. Our latest letters for this year are in October. One to Mr. Charles Kent, sympathizing with him on a disappointment which he had experienced in a business undertaking, and one to Mr. Macready, in which he tells him of his being in the preliminary agonies of a new book. The first number of Edwin Drood was to appear before the end of his course of readings in March, and he was at work so long beforehand with a view to sparing himself and having some numbers ready before the publication of the first one. Mr. F. D. Finlay. The Athenham Club, New Year's Day, 1869. My dear Finlay, first, my heartfelt wishes for many prosperous and happy years. Next, as to the mayor's kind intentions, I feel really grateful to him and gratified by the whole idea, but acceptance of the distinction on my part would be impracticable. My time in Ireland is all anticipated, and I could not possibly prolong my stay, because I must be back in London to read on Tuesday fortnight, and then must immediately set forth for the west of England. It is not likely, besides, that I shall get through these farewells before the end of May, and the work is so hard, and my voice is so precious, that I fear to add an ounce to the fatigue, or I might be overweighted. The avoidance of gas and crowds, when I am not in the act of being cooked before those lights of mine, is an essential part of the training to which, as I think you know, I strictly adhere, and although I have accepted the Liverpool invitation, I have done so as an exception, the Liverpool people having always treated me in our public relations with a kind of personal affection. I am sincerely anxious that the Mayor of Belfast should know how the case stands with me. If you will kindly set me straight and right, I shall be truly obliged to you. My sister-in-law has been very unwell, though she is now much better, and is recommended a brisk change. As she is a good sailor, I mean to bring her to Ireland with me, at which she is highly delighted. Faithfully yours ever, M. de Surjat. The remarkable story, of which he writes to his daughter in August, was called An Experience. It was written by a lady who prefers to be anonymous, who had been a contributor to Household Words from its first starting, and was always highly valued in this capacity by Charles Dickens. Our latest letters for this year are in October. One to Mr. Charles Kent, sympathizing with him on a disappointment which he had experienced in a business undertaking, and one to Mr. Macready, in which he tells him of his being in the preliminary agonies of a new book. The first number of Edwin Drood was to appear before the end of his course of readings in March, and he was at work so long beforehand with a view to sparing himself and having some numbers ready before the publication of the first one. Mr. F. D. Finlay. The Athenaeum Club, New Year's Day, 1869. My dear Finlay, first, my heartfelt wishes for many prosperous and happy years. Next, as to the Mayor's kind intentions, I feel really grateful to him and gratified by the whole idea, but acceptance of the distinction on my part would be impracticable. My time in Ireland is all anticipated, and I could not possibly prolong my stay, because I must be back in London to read on Tuesday fortnight, and then must immediately set forth for the west of England. It is not likely, besides, that I shall get through these farewells before the end of May, and the work is so hard, and my voice is so precious, that I fear to add an ounce to the fatigue, or I might be overweighted. The avoidance of gas and crowds, when I am not in the act of being cooked before those lights of mine, is an essential part of the training to which, as I think you know, I strictly adhere, and although I have accepted the Liverpool invitation, I have done so as an exception, the Liverpool people having always treated me in our public relations with a kind of personal affection. I am sincerely anxious that the Mayor of Belfast should know how the case stands with me. If you will kindly set me straight and right, I shall be truly obliged to you. My sister-in-law has been very unwell, though she is now much better, and is recommended a brisk change. As she is a good sailor, I mean to bring her to Ireland with me, at which she is highly delighted. Faithfully yours ever, M. de Surjat. Gad's Hill Place, Higham by Rochester, Kent. Monday, Jan. 4th, 1869. My dear Surjat, I will answer your question first. Have I done with my farewell readings? Lord bless you, no, and I shall think myself well out of it if I get done by the end of May. I have undertaken 106, and have as yet only vanquished 28. Tomorrow night I read in London for the first time The Murder from Oliver Twist, which I have rearranged for the purpose. Next day I start for Dublin and Belfast. I am just back from Scotland for a few Christmas holidays. I go back there next month, and in the meantime and afterwards go everywhere else. Take my guarantee for it, you may be quite comfortable on the subject of papal aspirations and encroachments. The English people are in unconquerable opposition to that church. They have the animosity in the blood, derived from the history of the past, though perhaps unconsciously. But they do sincerely want to win Ireland over if they can. They know that since the Union she has been hardly used. They know that Scotland has her religion, and a very uncomfortable one. They know that Scotland, though intensely anti-papal, perceives it to be unjust that Ireland has not her religion too, and has very emphatically declared her opinion in the late elections. They know that a richly endowed church, forced upon a people who don't belong to it, is a grievance with these people. They know that many things, but especially an artfully and schemingly managed institution like the Romish Church, thrive upon a grievance, and that Rome has thriven exceedingly upon this and made the most of it. Lastly, the best among them know that there is a gathering cloud in the west, considerably bigger than a man's hand, under which a powerful Irish-American body, rich and active, is always drawing Ireland in that direction, and that these are not times in which other powers would back our holding Ireland by force, unless we could make our claim good in proving fair and equal government. Poor Townshend charged me in his will to publish without alteration his religious opinions, which he sincerely believed would tend to the happiness of mankind. To publish them without alteration is absolutely impossible, for they are distributed in the strangest fragments through the strangest notebooks, pocketbooks, slips of paper, and what not, and produce a most incoherent and tautological result. I infer that he must have held some always postponed idea of fitting them together. For these reasons, I would certainly publish nothing about them if I had any discretion in the matter. Having none, I suppose a book must be made. His pictures and rings are gone to the South Kensington Museum and are now exhibiting there. Charlie Collins is no better and no worse. Katie looks very young and very pretty. Her sister and Miss Hogarth, my joint housekeepers, have been on duty this Christmas and have had enough to do. My boys are now all dispersed in South America, India, and Australia, except Charlie, whom I have taken on at all the year-round office, and Henry, who is an undergraduate at Trinity Hall, and I hope will make his mark there. All well. The Thames Embankment is, faults of ugliness in detail apart, the finest public work yet done. From Westminster Bridge to near Waterloo, it is now lighted up at night, and has a fine effect. They have begun to plant it with trees, and the footway, not the road, is already open to the Temple. Besides its beauty and its usefulness in relieving the crowded streets, it will greatly quicken and deepen what is learnedly called the scour of the river. But the Corporation of London and some other nuisances have brought the weirs above Twickenham into a very bare and unsound condition, and they already begin to give and vanish, as the stream runs faster and stronger. Your undersigned friend has had a few occasional reminders of his true American catarrh. Although I have exerted my voice very much, it has not yet been once touched. In America, I was obliged to patch it up constantly. I like to read your patriarchal account of yourself among your Swiss vines and fig trees. You wouldn't recognize Gad's Hill now. I have so changed it and bought land about it. And yet I often think that if Mary were to marry, which she won't, I should sell it and go genteelly vagabondizing over the face of the earth. Then indeed I might see Lausanne again. But I don't seem in the way of it at present, for the older I get, the more I do and the harder I work. Yours ever affectionately, Miss Mary Boyle. Office of All the Year Round. Wednesday, Jan. 6th, 1869. My dear Mary, I was more affected than you can easily believe by the sight of your gift lying on my dressing table on the morning of the New Year. To be remembered in a friend's heart when it is sore is a touching thing, and that, and the remembrance of the dead quite overpowered me, the one being inseparable from the other. You may be sure that I shall attach a special interest and value to the beautiful present, and shall wear it as a kind of charm. God bless you, and may we carry the friendship through many coming years. My preparations for a certain murder that I had to do last night have rendered me unfit for letter writing these last few days, or you would have heard from me sooner. The crime being completely off my mind and the blood spilled, I am, like many of my fellow criminals, in a highly edifying state today. Ever believe me, your affectionate friend, Miss Dickens. Torquay, Wednesday, Jan. 27th, 1869. My dearest Mamie, we have been doing immensely. This place is most beautiful, though colder now than one would expect. This hotel, an immense place, built among picturesque broken rocks out in the blue sea, is quite delicious. There are bright green trees in the garden, and new peas a foot high. Our rooms are en suite, all commanding the sea, and each with 2 very large plate-glass windows. Everything good and well served. A pantomime was being done last night, in the place where I am to read tonight. It is something between a theatre, a circus, a riding school, a Methodist chapel, and a cowhouse. I was so disgusted with its acoustic properties on going in to look at it that the whole unfortunate staff have been all day, and now are sticking up baize and carpets in it to prevent echoes. I have rarely seen a more uncomfortable edifice than I thought it last night. At Clifton, on Monday night, we had a contagion of fainting, and yet the place was not hot. I should think we had from 12 to 20 ladies borne out, stiff and rigid, at various times. It became quite ridiculous. Miss Hogarth. Bath, Friday, Jan. 29th, 1869. My dearest Georgie, you must not trust blank places in my list, because many have been, and will be, gradually filled up. After the Tuesday's reading in London, I have 2 for that same week in the country, Nottingham and Leicester. In the following week I have none, but my arrangements are all at sea as yet, for I must somehow and somewhere do an uncommercial in that week, and I also want to get poor Chauncey's opinions to the printer. This mouldy old roosting place comes out mouldily as to let, of course. I hate the sight of the bygone assembly rooms and the bath chairs trundling the dowagers about the streets. As to tomorrow morning in the daylight, I have no cold to speak of. Dolby sends kindest regard. Mrs. Layman. Office, Wednesday, Feb. 3rd, 1869. Dear Mrs. Layman, before getting your kind note, I had written to Layman, explaining why I cannot allow myself any social pleasure while my farewell task is yet unfinished. The work is so very hard that every little scrap of rest and silence I can pick up is precious, and even those morsels are so flavored with all the year round that they are not quite the genuine article. Joachim came round to see me at the hall last night, and I told him how sorry I was to forgo the pleasure of meeting him. He is a noble fellow, at your pleasant table. I am glad you are coming to the murder on the 2nd of March. The house will be prodigious. Such little changes as I have made shall be carefully presented to your critical notice, and I hope will be crowned with your approval. But you are always such a fine audience that I have no fear on that head. I saw Chorley yesterday in his own room, a sad and solitary sight. The widow Drake, with a certain incoherence of manner, presented a blooming countenance and buxom form in the passage, so buxom indeed that she was obliged to retire before me like a modest stopper, before I could get into the dining decanter where poor Chorley reposed. Faithfully yours always. P.S. My love to Rudy. Miss Hogarth. Glasgow, Thursday, Feb. 25th, 1869. I received your letter at Edinburgh this morning. I did not write to you yesterday, as there had been no reading on the previous night. The foot bears the fatigue wonderfully well, and really occasions me no inconvenience beyond the necessity of wearing the big work of art. Symes saw me again this morning, and utterly scouted the gout notion altogether. I think the Edinburgh audience understood the murder better last night than any audience that has heard it yet. Business is enormous, and Dolby jubilant. It is a most deplorable afternoon here, deplorable even for Glasgow. A great wind blowing and sleet driving before it in a storm of heavy blobs. We had to drive our train dead in the teeth of the wind and got in here late and are pressed for time. Strange that in the north we have had absolutely no snow. There was a very thin scattering on the Pentlands for an hour or two, but no more. Miss Hogarth. Edinburgh, Friday, Feb. 26th, 1869. Writing tomorrow morning would be all but impracticable for me, would be quite so for Dolby, who has to go to the agent's and settle up in the midst of his breakfast. So I write today, in reply to your note received at Glasgow this morning. The foot conducts itself splendidly. We had a most enormous cram at Glasgow. Symes saw me again yesterday before I left here for Glasgow and repeated gout, with the greatest indignation and contempt, several times. The aching is going off as the day goes on, if it be worth mentioning again. The ride from Glasgow was charming this morning, the sun shining brilliantly and the country looking beautiful. I told you what the Nortons were. Mabel Lowell is a charming little thing and very retiring in manner and expression. We shall have a scene here tonight, no doubt. The night before last, Ballantyne, unable to get in, had a seat behind the screen and was nearly frightened off it by the murder. Every vestige of color had left his face when I came off, and he sat staring over a glass of champagne in the wildest way. I have utterly left off my champagne, and I think, with good results. Nothing during the readings, but a very little weak iced brandy and water. I hope you will find me greatly improved on Tuesday. Miss Dickens. Birmingham, Friday, March 5th, 1869. This is to send you my best love, and to wish you many and many happy returns of tomorrow, which I miraculously remember to be your birthday. I saw this morning a very pretty fan here. I was going to buy it as a remembrance of the occasion, when I was checked by a dim misgiving that you had a fan not long ago from Chorley. Tell me what you would like better, and consider me your debtor in that article, whatever it may be. I have had my usual left boot on this morning, and have had an hour's walk. It was in a gale of wind and a simoom of dust, but I greatly enjoyed it. Immense enthusiasm at Wolverhampton last night over Marigold. Scott made a most amazing ass of himself yesterday. He reported that he had left behind somewhere 3 books, Boots, Murder, and Gamp. We immediately telegraphed to the office. Answer, no books there, as my impression was that he must have left them at St. James's Hall. We then arranged to send him up to London at 7 this morning. Meanwhile, though not reproached, he wept copiously and audibly. I had asked him over and over again, was he sure he had not put them in my large black trunk? Too sure, too sure. Hadn't opened that trunk after Tuesday night's reading. He opened it to get some clothes out when I went to bed, and there the books were. He produced them with an air of injured surprise, as if we had put them there. Miss Hogarth. Queen's Hotel, Manchester, Sunday, March 7th, 1869. We have had our sitting-room chimney afire this morning, and have had to turn out elsewhere to breakfast, but the chamber has since been cleaned up, and we are reinstated. Manchester is, for Manchester, bright and fresh. Tell Russell that a crop of hay is to be got off the meadow this year, before the club use it. They did not make such use of it last year as reconciles me to losing another hay crop, so they must wait until the hay is in, before they commence active operations. Poor Olive, I am truly sorry to read those sad words about his suffering, and fear that the end is not far off. We are very comfortably housed here, and certainly that immense hall is a wonderful place for its size. Without much greater expenditure of voice than usual, I a little enlarged the action last night, and Dolby, who went to all the distant points of view, reported that he could detect no difference between it and any other place. As always happens now, and did not at first, they were unanimously taken by Noah Claypole's laugh, but the go throughout was enormous. Sims Reeves was doing Henry Bertram at the theatre, and of course took some of our shillings. It was a night of excitement for Cottonopolis. I received from Mrs. Keeley this morning a very good photograph of poor old Bob. Yesterday I had a letter from Harry reminding me that our intended Cambridge day is the day next after that of the Bow Trace. Clearly it must be changed. Miss Hogarth. Queen's Hotel, Manchester, Saturday, March 20th, 1869. Getting yours and its enclosure, Mary's note. At 2 this afternoon, I write a line at once in order that you may have it on Monday morning. Theatre Royal, Liverpool, will be a charming place to read in. Ladies are to dine at the dinner, and we hear it is to be a very grand affair. Dolby is doubtful whether it may not hurt the business by drawing a great deal of money in another direction, which I think possible enough. Trade is very bad here, and the gloom of the Preston strike seems to brood over the place. The Titians Company have been doing wretchedly. I should have a greater sympathy with them if they were not practicing in the next room. My love to Letitia and Harriet, wherein Dolby, highly gratified by being held in remembrance, joins with the same to you. Miss Hogarth. Manchester, Sunday, March 21st, 1869. Will you tell Mary that I have had a letter from Frith, in which he says that he will be happy to show her his pictures any day in the first week of April? I have replied that she will be proud to receive his invitation. His object in writing was to relieve his mind about the murder, of which he cannot say enough. Tremendous enthusiasm here last night, calling in the most thunderous manner after Marigold, and again after the trial, shaking the great hall and cheering furiously. Love to all. Mr. John Clark. Gad's Hill Place, Higham by Rochester, Kent. Wednesday, March 24th, 1869. Ladies and gentlemen, I beg to assure you that I am much gratified by the desire you do me the honor to express in your letter handed to me by Mr. John Clark. Before that letter reached me, I had heard of your wish, and had mentioned to Messrs. Chappell that it would be highly agreeable to me to anticipate it, if possible. They readily responded, and we agreed upon having 3 morning readings in London. As they are not yet publicly announced, I add a note of the days and subjects. Saturday, May 1st, Boots at the Holly Tree Inn, and Sykes and Nancy from Oliver Twist. Saturday, May 8th, The Christmas Carol. Saturday, May 22nd, Sykes and Nancy from Oliver Twist, and The Trial from Pickwick. With the warmest interest in your art, and in its claims upon the general gratitude and respect. Believe me, always faithfully your friend, Miss Hogarth. Adelphi Hotel, Liverpool, Sunday, April 4th, 1869. By this post, I send to Mary the truly affecting account of poor dear Katie Macready's death. It is as sorrowful as anything so peaceful and trustful can be. Both my feet are very tender, and often feel as though they were in hot water, but I was wonderfully well and strong, thank God, and had no end of voice for the 2 nights running in that great Birmingham hall. We had enormous houses. So far as I understand the dinner arrangements here, they are much too long. As to the acoustics of that hall and the position of the tables, both as bad can be, my only consolation is that, if anybody can be heard, I probably can be. The honorary secretary tells me that 600 people are to dine. The mayor, being no speaker and out of health besides, hands over the toast of the evening to Lord Dufferin. The town is full of the festival. The Theatre Royal, touched up for the occasion, will look remarkably bright and well for the readings, and our lets are large. It is remarkable that our largest let as yet is for Thursday, not Friday. I infer that the dinner damages Friday, but Dolby does not think so. There appears to be great curiosity to hear the murder. On Friday night last I read to 2,000 people and odd hundreds. I hear that Anthony Trollope, Dixon, Lord Houghton, Lemon, Esquiros of the Revue des Deux Mondes, and Sala are to be called upon to speak, the last, for the newspaper press. All the Liverpool notabilities are to muster, and Manchester is to be represented by its mayor with due formality. I had been this morning to look at St. George's Hall and suggest what can be done to improve its acoustics. As usually happens in such cases, their most important arrangements are already made and unchangeable. I should not have placed the tables in the committee's way at all, and could certainly have placed the dais to much greater advantage. So all the good I could do was to show where banners could be hung with some hope of stopping echoes. Such is my small news, soon exhausted. We arrived here at 3 yesterday afternoon. It is now midday. Chorley has not yet appeared, but he had called at the local agents while I was at Birmingham. It is a curious little instance of the way in which things fit together that there is a ship of war in the Mersey, whose flags and so forth are to be brought up to St. George's Hall for the dinner. She is the Donegal, of which Painter told me he had just been captain, when he told me all about Sydney at Bath. One of the pleasantest things I have experienced here this time is the manner in which I am stopped in the streets by working men who want to shake hands with me and tell me they know my books. I never go out but this happens. Down at the docks just now, a cooper with a fearful stutter presented himself in this way. His modesty, combined with a conviction that if he were in earnest I would see it and wouldn't repel him, made up as true a piece of natural politeness as I ever saw. Miss Hogarth. Imperial Hotel, Blackpool, Wednesday, April 21st, 1869. I send you this hasty line to let you know that I have come to this sea beach hotel, charming, for a day's rest. I am much better than I was on Sunday, but shall want careful looking to get through the readings. My weakness and deadness are all on the left side, and if I don't look at anything I try to touch with my left hand, I don't know where it is. I am in secret consultation with Frank Beard. He recognizes, in the exact description I have given him, indisputable evidences of overwork, which he would wish to treat immediately. So I have said, go in and win. I have had a delicious walk by the sea today, and I sleep soundly and have picked up amazingly in appetite. My foot is greatly better too, and I wear my own boot. Miss Dickens. Preston, Thursday evening, April 22nd, 1869. Don't be in the least alarmed. Beard has come down and instantly echoes my impression, perfectly unknown to him, that the readings must be stopped. I have had symptoms that must not be disregarded. I go to Liverpool tonight with him to get away from here and proceed to the office tomorrow. The Lord John Russell. Gad's Hill Place, Higham by Rochester, Kent. Wednesday, May 26th, 1869. My dear Lord Russell, I have delayed answering your kind letter in order that you might get home before I wrote. I am happy to report myself quite well again, and I shall be charmed to come to Pembroke Lodge on any day that may be most convenient to Lady Russell and yourself after the middle of June. You gratify me beyond expression by your reference to the Liverpool dinner. I made the allusion to you with all my heart at least, and it was most magnificently received. I beg to send my kind regard to Lady Russell, with many thanks for her remembrance, and am ever, my dear Lord Russell, faithfully yours. Mr. W. H. Wills. Office of All the Year Round. Thursday, June 24th, 1869. My dear Wills, at a great meeting compounded of your late chief, Charlie, Morley, Grieve, and Telban, your letter was read today, and a very sincere record of regret and thanks was placed on the books of the great institution. Many thanks for the suggestion about the condition of churches. I am so hoary of church questions of all sorts that I am not quite clear as to tackling this, but I am turning it in my mind. I am afraid of two things. Firstly, that the thing would not be picturesquely done. Secondly, that a general cucumber coolness would pervade the mind of our circulation. Nothing new here but a speaking pipe, a post box, and a moldy smell from some forgotten crypt, an extra moldy smell, moldier than of yore. Lily sniffs, projects one eye into 1999, and does no more. I have been to Chadwick's to look at a new kind of cottage he has built, very ingenious and cheap. We were all much disappointed last Saturday afternoon by a neighboring fire being only at a carpenter's and not at Drury Lane Theatre. Ellen's child having an eye nearly poked out by a young friend, and being asked whether the young friend was not very sorry afterwards, replied, "No, she wasn't, I was." London, execrable. Ever affectionately yours. P.S. Love to Mrs. Wills. Mr. Shirley Brooks. Gad's Hill Place, Higham by Rochester, Kent. Tuesday, July 12th, 1869. My dear Brooks, I have appended my signed manual to the memorial, which I think is very discreetly drawn up. I have a strong feeling of sympathy with poor Mrs. Cunningham, for I remember the pretty house she managed charmingly. She has always done her duty well and has had hard trials, but I greatly doubt the success of the memorial, I am sorry to add. It was hotter here yesterday on this Kentish chalk than I have felt it anywhere for many a day. Now it is overcast and raining hard, much to the satisfaction of great farmers like myself. I am glad to infer from your companionship with the cocked hats that there is no such thing as gout within several miles of you. May it keep its distance. Ever, my dear Brooks, faithfully yours. Mr. W. C. Macready. Gad's Hill, Tuesday, July 20th, 1869. My dearest Macready, I have received your letter here today, and deeply feel with you, and for you the affliction of poor dear Katie's loss. I was not unprepared for the sad news, but it comes in such a rush of old remembrances and withered joys that strikes to the heart. God bless you, love and youth are still beside you, and in that thought I take comfort for my dear old friend. I am happy to report myself perfectly well and flourishing. We are just now announcing the resumption and conclusion of the broken series of farewell readings in a London course of 12, beginning early in the new year. Scarcely a day has gone by this summer in which we have not talked of you and yours. Georgina, Mary, and I continually speak of you. In the spirit, we certainly are even more together than we used to be in the body in the old times. I don't know whether you have heard that Harry has taken the second scholarship, £50 a year, at Trinity Hall, Cambridge. The bigwigs expect him to do a good deal there. Will's having given up in consequence of broken health. He has been my sub-editor for 20 years. I have taken Charlie into All the Year Round. He is a very good man of business and evinces considerable aptitude in sub-editing work. This place is immensely improved since you were here, and really is now very pretty indeed. We are sorry that there is no present prospect of your coming to see it, but I like to know of your being at the sea and having to do from the beach, as Mrs. Keeley used to say in The Prisoner of War, with the winds and the waves and all their freshening influences. I dined at Greenwich a few days ago with Delane. He asked me about you with much interest. He looks as if he had never seen a printing office and had never been out of bed after midnight. Great excitement caused here by your capital news of Buddy. I suppose Willie has at least a dozen children by this time. Our loves to the noble boy and to dear Mrs. Macready. Ever my dearest Macready. Your attached and affectionate Mr. Edmund Ollier. Gad's Hill Place, Higham by Rochester, Kent. Tuesday, Aug. 3rd, 1869. My dear Mr. Ollier, I am very sensible of the feeling of the committee towards me, and I receive their invitation, conveyed through you, as a most acceptable mark of their consideration. But I have a very strong objection to speech-making beside graves. I do not expect or wish my feeling in this wise to guide other men. Still, it is so serious with me, and the idea of ever being the subject of such a ceremony myself is so repugnant to my soul that I must decline to officiate. Faithfully yours always, Miss Dickens. Office of All the Year Round, number 26, Wellington Street. Strand, London, W.C. Tuesday, Aug. 3rd, 1869. My dearest Mamie, I send you the second chapter of the remarkable story. The printer is late with it, and I have not had time to read it, and as I altered it considerably here and there, I have no doubt there are some verbal mistakes in it. However, they will probably express themselves. But I offer a prize of 6 pairs of gloves, between you and your aunt and Ellen Stone, as competitors, to whomsoever will tell me what idea in this second part is mine. I don't mean an idea in language, in the turning of a sentence, in any little description of an action or a gesture, or what not in a small way, but an idea, distinctly affecting the whole story as I found it. You are all to assume that I found it in the main as you read it, with one exception. If I had written it, I should have made the woman love the man at last, and I should have shadowed that possibility out, by the child's bringing them a little more together on that holiday Sunday. But I didn't write it, so finding that it wanted something, I put that something in. What was it? Love to Ellen Stone. Mr. Arthur Ryland. Gad's Hill Place, Higham by Rochester, Kent. Friday, Aug. 13th, 1869. My dear Mr. Ryland, many thanks for your letter. I have very strong opinions on the subject of speechification, and hold that there is, everywhere, a vast amount too much of it. A sense of absurdity would be so strong upon me, if I got up at Birmingham to make a flourish, on the advantages of education in the abstract for all sorts and conditions of men, that I should inevitably check myself and present a surprising incarnation of the soul of wit. But if I could interest myself in the practical usefulness of the particular institution, in the ways of life of the students, in their examples of perseverance and determination to get on, in their numbers, their favorite studies, the number of hours they must daily give to the work that must be done for a livelihood before they can devote themselves to the acquisition of new knowledge, and so forth, then I could interest others. This is the kind of information I want. Mere holding forth I utterly detest, abominate, and abjure. I fear I shall not be in London next week, but if you will kindly send me here, at your leisure, the roughest notes of such points as I have indicated, I shall be heartily obliged to you, and will take care of their falling into shape and order in my mind. Meantime, I make a note of Monday, 27th September, and of writing to you touching your kind offer of hospitality 3 weeks before that date. I beg to send my kind regard to Mrs. and Miss Ryland, and am always very faithfully yours, Mr. Frederick Ouvry, Gad's Hill Place, Higham by Rochester, Kent. Sunday, Aug. 22nd, 1869. My dear Ouvry, I will expect a call from you at the office on Thursday at your own most convenient hour. I admit the soft impeachment concerning Mrs. Gamp. I likes my payments to be made reglar, and I likewise likes my publisher to draw it mild. Ever yours, Mr. Arthur Ryland, Gad's Hill Place, Higham by Rochester, Kent. Monday, Sept. 6th, 1869. My dear Mr. Ryland, I am sorry to find, I had a foreshadowing of it some weeks ago, that I shall not be able to profit by your kind offer of hospitality when I come to Birmingham for our institution. I must come down in time for a quiet dinner at the hotel with my readings, secretary, Mr. Dolby, and must away next morning. Besides having a great deal in hand just now, the title of a new book among other things, I shall have visitors from abroad here at the time, and am severely claimed by my daughter, who indeed is disloyal to Birmingham in the matter of my going away at all. Pray represent me to Mrs. Ryland as the innocent victim of circumstances, and as sacrificing pleasure to the work I have to do, and to the training under which alone I can do it without feeling it. You will see from the enclosed that I am in full force, and going to finish my readings, please God, after Christmas. I am in the hope of receiving your promised notes in due course, and continue in the irreverent condition in which I last reported myself on the subject of speech-making. Now that men not only make the nights of the session hideous by what the Americans call orating in Parliament, but trouble the peace of the vacation by saying over again what they said there, with the addition of what they didn't say there, and never will have the courage to say there, I feel indeed that silence, like gold across the Atlantic, is a rarity at a premium. Faithfully yours always, Mr. William Charles Kent. Office of All the Year Round. Thursday, Oct. 7th, 1869. My dear Kent, I felt that you would be deeply disappointed. I thought it better not to make the first sign while you were depressed, but my mind has been constantly with you, and not mine alone. You cannot think with what affection and sympathy you have been made the subject of our family dinner talk at Gad's Hill these last 3 days. Nothing could exceed the interest of my daughters and my sister-in-law, or the earnestness of their feeling about it. I have been really touched by its warm and genuine expression. Cheer up, my dear fellow, cheer up, for God's sake. That is, for the sake of all that is good in you and around you. Ever your affectionate friend, Mr. W. C. Macready. Gad's Hill, Monday, Oct. 18th, 1869. My dearest Macready, I duly received your letter nearly a fortnight ago with the greatest interest and pleasure. Above all things, I am delighted with the prospect of seeing you here next summer, a prospect which has been received with 9 times 9 and 1 more by the whole house. You will hardly know the place again, it is so changed. You are not expected to admire, but there is a conservatory building at this moment. Be still, my soul. This leaves me in the preliminary agonies of a new book, which I hope to begin publishing in 12 numbers, not 20, next March. The coming readings being all in London and being, after the first fortnight, only once a week, will divert my attention very little, I hope. Harry has just gone up to Cambridge again, and I hope will get a fellowship in good time. Wills is much gratified by your remembrance and sends you his warm regard. He wishes me to represent that he is very little to be pitied, that he suffers no pain, scarcely inconvenience, even so long as he is idle, that he likes idleness exceedingly. He has bought a country place by Welwyn in Hertfordshire, near Lytton's, and takes possession presently. My boy Sidney is now a second lieutenant, the youngest in the service, I believe. He has the highest testimonials as an officer. You may be quite sure there will be no international racing in American waters. Oxford knows better, or I am mistaken. The Harvard crew were a very good set of fellows and very modest. Ryland of Birmingham doesn't look a day older and was full of interest in you and asked me to remind you of him. By the by, at Elkington's I saw a pair of immense tea-urns from a railway station, Stafford, sent there to be repaired. They were honeycombed within in all directions and had been supplying the passengers, under the active agency of hot water, with decomposed lead, copper, and a few other deadly poisons, for heaven knows how many years. I must leave off in a hurry to catch the post, after a hard day's work. Ever, my dearest Macready, your most affectionate and attached. 1870. Narrative. Charles Dickens passed his last Christmas and New Year's Day at Gad's Hill, with a party of family and friends, in the usual way, except that he was suffering again from an attack of the foot trouble, particularly on Christmas Day, when he was quite disabled by it, and unable to walk at all, able only to join the party in the evening by keeping his room all day. However, he was better in a day or two, and early in January he went to London, where he had taken the house of his friends, Mr. and Mrs. Milner Gibson, for the season. His series of farewell readings at St. James's Hall began in January and ended on the 16th March. He was writing Edwin Drood also, and was, of course, constantly occupied with all the year-round work. In the beginning of January, he fulfilled his promise of paying a second visit to Birmingham and making a speech, of which he writes in his last letter to Mr. Macready. For his last reading he gave the Christmas Carol and the Trial from Pickwick, and at the end of the evening he addressed a few farewell words to his audience. It was a memorable and splendid occasion. He was very deeply affected by the loving enthusiasm of his greeting, and it was a real sorrow to him to give up forever the personal associations with thousands of the readers of his books. But when the pain, mingled with pleasure, of this last reading was over, he felt greatly the relief of having undisturbed time for his own quieter pursuits, and looked forward to writing the last numbers of Edwin Drood at Gad's Hill, where he was to return in June. The last public appearance of any kind that he made was at the Royal Academy dinner in May. He was at the time far from well, but he made a great effort to be present and to speak, from his strong desire to pay a tribute to the memory of his dear old friend Mr. Maclise, who died in April. Her Majesty having expressed a wish, conveyed through Mr. Helps, afterwards Sir Arthur Helps, to have a personal interview with Charles Dickens, he accompanied Mr. Helps to Buckingham Palace one afternoon in March. He was most graciously and kindly received by Her Majesty, and came away with a hope that the visit had been mutually agreeable. The Queen presented him with a copy of her journal in the Highlands, with an autograph inscription, and he had afterwards the pleasure of requesting her acceptance of a set of his books. He attended a levee held by the Prince of Wales in April, and the last time he dined out in London was at a party given by Lord Houghton for the King of the Belgians and the Prince of Wales, who had both expressed a desire to meet Charles Dickens. All through the season he had been suffering, at intervals, from the swollen foot, and on this occasion it was so bad that up to the last moment it was very doubtful whether he could fulfill his engagement. We have very few letters for this year, and none of any very particular interest, but we give them all as they are the last. Mr. S. L. Filders was his new illustrator, to whom he alludes in a note to Mr. Frith, We also give a short note to Mr. Filders himself. The correspondence of Charles Dickens with Mrs. Dallas Glynn, the celebrated actress, for whom he had a great friendship, is so much on the subject of her own business that we have only been able to select 2 notes of any public interest. In explanation of the last letter, we give an extract from a letter addressed to the Daily News by Mr. J.M. Mayhem soon after the death of Charles Dickens, as follows: that the public may exactly understand the circumstances under which Charles Dickens's letter to me was written, I am bound to explain that it is in reply to a letter which I addressed to him in reference to a passage in the 10th chapter of Edwin Drood, respecting which I ventured to suggest that he had, perhaps, forgotten that the figure of speech alluded to by him, in a way which, to my certain knowledge, was distasteful to some of his admirers, was drawn from a passage of Holy Writ, which is greatly reverenced by a large number of his countrymen as a prophetic description of the sufferings of our Savior. The MS of the little History of the New Testament is now in the possession of his eldest daughter. She has, together with her aunt, received many earnest entreaties, both from friends and strangers, that this history might be allowed to be published for the benefit of other children. These many petitions have his daughter's fullest sympathy, but she knows that her father wrote this history only for his own children, that it was his particular wish that it never should be published, and she therefore holds this wish as sacred and irrevocable. Mr. W. H. Wills, 5 Hyde Park Place, London, W. Sunday, Jan. 23rd, 1870. My dear Wills, in the note I had from you about Nancy and Sykes, you seem to refer to some other note you had written me. Therefore, I think it well merely to mention that I have received no other note. I do not wonder at your not being up to the undertaking, even if you had had no cough, under the wearing circumstances. It was a very curious scene. The actors and actresses, most of the latter looking very pretty, mustered in extraordinary force, and were a fine audience. I set myself to carrying out of themselves and their observation those who were bent on watching how the effects were got, and I believe I succeeded. Coming back to it again, however, I feel it was madness ever to do it so continuously. My ordinary pulse is 72, and it runs up under this effort to 112. Besides which, it takes me 10 or 12 minutes to get my wind back at all, I being in the meantime like the man who lost the fight, in fact, his express image. Frank Beard was in attendance to make divers experiments to report to Watson, and although, as you know, he stopped it instantly when he found me at Preston, he was very much astonished by the effects of the reading on the reader. So I hope you may be able to come and hear it before it is silent forever. It is done again on the evenings of the 1st February, 15th February, and 8th March. I hope, now I have got over the mornings, that I may be able to work on my book. But up to this time, the great preparation required in getting the subjects up again, and the twice a week besides, have almost exclusively occupied me. I have something the matter with my right thumb, and can't, as you see, write plainly. I sent a word to poor Robert Chambers, and I send my love to Mrs. Wills. Ever, my dear Wills, affectionately yours. Mrs. Dallas. Office of All the Year Round. Wednesday, Jan. 16th, 1870. My dear Mrs. Dallas, it is perfectly delightful to me to get your fervent and sympathetic note this morning. 1,000 thanks for it. I will take care that 2 places on the front row by my daughter are reserved for your occasion next time. I cannot see you in too good a seat or too often. Believe me, ever very faithfully yours, Mr. S. L. Filders. Office of All the Year Round. Wednesday, Jan. 16th, 1870. Dear Sir, I beg to thank you for the highly meritorious and interesting specimens of your art that you have had the kindness to send me. I return them herewith, after having examined them with the greatest pleasure. I am naturally curious to see your drawing from David Copperfield, in order that I may compare it with my own idea. In the meanwhile, I can honestly assure you that I entertain the greatest admiration for your remarkable powers. Faithfully yours, Mr. Henry Fielding Dickens. 5 Hyde Park Place, W. Thursday, Feb. 17th, 1870. My dear Harry, I am extremely glad to hear that you have made a good start at the Union. Take any amount of pains about it, open your mouth well and roundly, speak to the last person visible, and give yourself time. Loves from all. Ever affectionately, Mr. W. C. Macready. Wednesday, March 2nd, 1870. My dearest Macready, this is to wish you and yours all happiness and prosperity at the well-remembered anniversary tomorrow. You may be sure that loves and happy returns will not be forgotten at our table. I have been getting on very well with my book, and we are having immense audiences at St. James's Hall. Mary has been celebrating the first glimpses of spring by having the measles. She got over the disorder very easily, but a weakness remains behind. Katie is blooming. Georgina is in perfect order, and all send you their very best loves. It gave me true pleasure to have your sympathy with me in the second little speech at Birmingham. I was determined that my radicalism should not be called in question. The electric wires are not very exact in their reporting, but at all events the sense was there. Ryland, as usual, made all sorts of inquiries about you. With love to dear Mrs. Macready and the noble boy my particular friend, and a hearty embrace to you. I am ever, my dearest Macready, your most affectionate Mr. Office of All the Year Round. Wednesday, March 9th, 1870. My dear, you make me very uneasy on the subject of your new long story here, by sowing your name broadcast in so many fields at once, and undertaking such an impossible amount of fiction at one time. Just as you are coming on with us, you have another story in progress in the Gentleman's Magazine, and another announced in Once a Week. And so far as I know the art we both profess, it cannot be reasonably pursued in this way. I think the short story you are now finishing in these pages, obviously marked by traces of great haste and small consideration, and a long story similarly blemished, would really do the publication irreparable harm. These considerations are so much upon my mind that I cannot forbear representing them to you, in the hope that they may induce you to take a little more into account the necessity of care and preparation, and some self-denial in the quantity done. I am quite sure that I write fully as much in your interest as in that of All the Year Round. Believe me, always faithfully yours. The same. 5 Hyde Park Place, W. Friday, March 11th, 1870. My dear, of course the engagement between us is to continue, and I am sure you know me too well to suppose that I have ever had a thought to the contrary. Your explanation is, as it naturally would be, being yours, manly and honest, and I am both satisfied and hopeful. Ever yours, Mr. William Charles Kent. 5 Hyde Park Place, W. Saturday, March 26th, 1870. My dear Kent, I received both copies of The Sun with the tenderest pleasure and gratification. Everything that I can let you have in aid of the proposed record, which, of course, would be far more agreeable to me if done by you than by any other hand, shall be at your service. Dolby has all the figures relating to America, and you shall have for reference the books from which I read. They are afterwards going into Forster's collection. Ever affectionately, Mr. Henry Fielding Dickens. 5 Hyde Park Place, W. Tuesday, March 29th, 1870. My dear Harry, your next Tuesday's subject is a very good one. I would not lose the point that narrow-minded fanatics, who decry the theater and defame its artists, are absolutely the advocates of depraved and barbarous amusements. For wherever a good drama and a well-regulated theater decline, some distorted form of theatrical entertainment will infallibly arise in their place. In one of the last chapters of Hard Times, Mr. Sleary says something to the effect, people will be entertained tomhow th choir, make the best of us, and not the worst. Ever affectionately, Mr. Shirley Brooks. 5 Hyde Park Place, W. Friday, April 1st, 1870. My dear Shirley Brooks, I have written to Mr. Lowe, expressing my regret that I cannot comply with his request, backed as it is by my friend S.B. But I have told him what is perfectly true, that I leave town for the peaceful following of my own pursuits at the end of next month, that I have excused myself from filling all manner of claims, on the ground that the public engagements I could make for the season were very few and were all made, and that I cannot bear hot rooms when I am at work. I have smoothed this as you would have me smooth it. With your longing for fresh air, I can thoroughly sympathize. May you get it soon, and may you enjoy it, and profit by it half as much as I wish. Ever faithfully yours, Mr. W. P. Frith, R.A. 5 Hyde Park Place, W. Saturday, April 16th, 1870. My dear Frith, I shall be happy to go on Wednesday evening, if convenient. You please me with what you say of my new illustrator, of whom I have great hopes. Faithfully yours ever, Mr. William Charles Kent. Monday morning, April 25th, 1870. My dear Kent, I received your book with the greatest pleasure and heartily thank you for it. It is a volume of a highly prepossessing appearance and a most friendly look. I felt as if I should have taken to it at sight, even a very large even, though I had known nothing of its contents or of its author. For the last week, I have been most perseveringly and ding-dong-doggedly at work, making headway but slowly. The spring always has a restless influence over me, and I weary at any season of this London dining out beyond expression, and I yearn for the country again. This is my excuse for not having written to you sooner. Besides which, I had a baseless conviction that I should see you at the office last Thursday. Not having done so, I fear you must be worse, or no better. If you can let me have a report of yourself, pray do. Mrs. Frederick Pollock. 5 Hyde Park Place, W. Monday, May 2nd, 1870. My dear Mrs. Pollock, pray tell the illustrious Philip Van Artevelde that I will deal with the nefarious case in question if I can. I am a little doubtful of the practicability of doing so, and frisking outside the bounds of the law of libel. I have that high opinion of the law of England generally, which one is likely to derive from the impression that it puts all the honest men under the diabolical hoofs of all the scoundrels. It makes me cautious of doing right, an admirable instance of its wisdom. I was very sorry to have gone astray from you that Sunday, but as the earlier disciples entertained angels unawares, so the later often miss them haphazard. Your description of L'Enfant's acting is the complete truth in one short sentence. Nature's triumph over art, reversing the copybook axiom, but the Lord deliver us from Plessy's mechanical ingenuousness. And your petitioner will ever pray, and ever be, faithfully yours, Mrs. A. M. Ward. 5 Hyde Park Place, W. Wednesday, May 11th, 1870. My dear Mrs. Ward, I grieve to say that I am literally laid by the heels and incapable of dining with you tomorrow. A neuralgic affection of the foot, which usually seizes me about twice a year, and which will yield to nothing but days of fomentation and horizontal rest, set in last night, and has caused me very great pain ever since, and will too clearly be no better until it has had its usual time in which to wear itself out. I send my kindest regard to Ward, and beg to be pitied. Believe me, faithfully yours always, Mr. William Charles Kent. 5 Hyde Park Place, W. Tuesday, May 17th, 1870. My dear Kent, many thanks. It is only my neuralgic foot. It has given me such a sharp twist this time that I have not been able, in its extreme sensitiveness, to put any covering upon it except scalding fomentations. Having viciously bubbled and blistered it in all directions, I hope it now begins to see the folly of its ways. Affectionately, ever. P.S. I hope the sun shines. Mrs. Bancroft, Gad's Hill Place, Higham by Rochester, Kent. Thursday, May 31st, 1870. My dear Mrs. Bancroft, I'm most heartily obliged to you for your kind note, which I received here only last night, having come here from town circuitously to get a little change of air on the road. My sense of your interest cannot be better proved than by my trying the remedy you recommend, and that I will do immediately. As I shall be in town on Thursday, my troubling you to order it would be quite unjustifiable. I will use your name in applying for it, and will report the result after a fair trial. Whether this remedy succeeds or fails as to the neuralgia, I shall always consider myself under an obligation to it for having indirectly procured me the great pleasure of receiving a communication from you, for I hope I may lay claim to being one of the most earnest and delighted of your many artistic admirers. Believe me, faithfully yours. 2 last letters. Mr. William Charles Kent, Gad's Hill Place, Higham by Rochester, Kent. Handwritten letter, Gad's Hill Place, Higham by Rochester, Kent. Mr. John M. Makeham. Handwritten letter. Handwritten letter. All through this spring in London, Charles Dickens had been ailing in health, and it was remarked by many friends that he had a weary look, and was aged and altered. But he was generally in good spirits, and his family had no uneasiness about him, relying upon the country quiet and comparative rest at Gad's Hill to have their usual influence in restoring his health and strength. On the 2nd June, he attended a private play at the house of Mr. and Mrs. Freak, where his 2 daughters were among the actresses. The next day he went back to Gad's Hill. His daughter Kate, whose home was there at all times when she chose, and almost always through the summer months, went down on Sunday, the 5th June, for a day's visit to see the great improvement of the conservatory. Her father laughingly assured her she had now seen the last improvement at Gad's Hill. At this time he was tolerably well, but she remarked to her sister and aunt how strangely he was tired, and what a curious grey colour he had in his face after a very short walk on that Sunday afternoon. However, he seemed quite himself again in the evening. The next day his daughter Kate went back, accompanied by her sister, who was to pay her a short visit to London. Charles Dickens was very hard at work on the 6th number of Edwin Drood. On the Monday and Tuesday he was well, but he was unequal to much exercise. His last walk was one of his greatest favourites, through Cobham Park and Wood, on the afternoon of Tuesday. On the morning of Wednesday, the 8th, one of the loveliest days of a lovely summer, he was very well, in excellent spirits about his book, of which he said he must finish his number that day, the next Thursday being the day of his weekly visit to All the Year Round office. Therefore he would write all day in the chalet, and take no walk or drive until the evening. In the middle of the day he came to the house for an hour's rest, and smoked a cigar in the conservatory, out of which new addition to the house he was taking the greatest personal enjoyment, and seemed perfectly well and exceedingly cheerful and hopeful. When he came again to the house, about an hour before the time fixed for the early dinner, he seemed very tired, silent, and absorbed. But this was so usual with him after a day of engrossing work, that it caused no alarm or surprise to his sister-in-law, the only member of his household who happened to be at home. He wrote some letters, among them these last letters which we give in the library of the house, and also arranged many trifling business matters, with a view to his departure for London the next morning. He was to be accompanied, on his return at the end of the week, by Mr. Filders, to introduce the new illustrator to the neighbourhood in which many of the scenes of this last book of Charles Dickens, as of his first, were laid. It was not until they were seated at the dinner table that a striking change in the colour and expression of his face startled his sister-in-law, and on her asking him if he was ill, he said, "Yes, very ill. I have been very ill for the last hour." But on her expressing an intention of sending instantly for a doctor, he stopped her and said, no, he would go on with dinner and go afterwards to London. And then he made an effort to struggle against the fit that was fast coming on him, and talked, but incoherently and soon very indistinctly. It being now evident that he was ill, and very seriously ill, his sister-in-law begged him to come to his own room before she sent off for medical help. "Come and lie down," she entreated. "Yes, on the ground," he said very distinctly. These were the last words he spoke, and he slid from her arm and fell upon the floor. The servants brought a couch into the dining room, where he was laid. A messenger was dispatched for Mr. Steele, the Rochester doctor, and with a telegram to his doctor in London and to his daughters. This was a few minutes after 6 o'clock. His daughters arrived with Mr. Frank Beard this same evening, his eldest son the next morning, and his son Henry and his sister Letitia in the evening of the 9th, too late, alas. All through the night, Charles Dickens never opened his eyes or showed a sign of consciousness. In the afternoon of the 9th, Dr. Russell Reynolds arrived at Gad's Hill, having been summoned by Mr. Frank Beard to meet himself and Mr. Steele. But he could only confirm their hopeless verdict, and made his opinion known with much kind sympathy to the family before returning to London. Charles Dickens remained in the same unconscious state until the evening of this day, when at 10 minutes past 6, the watchers saw a shudder pass over him, heard him give a deep sigh, saw one tear roll down his cheek, and he was gone from them. And as they saw the dark shadow steal across his calm, beautiful face, not one among them, could they have been given such a power, would have recalled his sweet spirit back to earth. As his family were aware that Charles Dickens had a wish to be buried near Gad's Hill, arrangements were made for his burial in the pretty churchyard of Shorne, a neighboring village, of which he was very fond. But this intention was abandoned in consequence of a pressing request from the Dean and Chapter of Rochester Cathedral that his remains might be placed there. A grave was prepared and everything arranged, when it was made known to the family, through Dean Stanley, that there was a general and very earnest desire that Charles Dickens should find his resting place in Westminster Abbey. To such a fitting tribute to his memory, they could make no possible objection, although it was with great regret that they relinquished the idea of laying him in a place so closely identified with his life and his works. His name, notwithstanding, is associated with Rochester, a tablet to his memory having been placed by his executors on the wall of Rochester Cathedral. With regard to Westminster Abbey, his family only stipulated that the funeral might be made as private as possible, and that the words of his will, "I emphatically direct that I be buried in an inexpensive, unostentatious, and strictly private manner," should be religiously adhered to. And so they were, the solemn service in the vast cathedral being as private as the most thoughtful consideration could make it. The family of Charles Dickens were deeply grateful to all in authority who so carried out his wishes, and more especially to Dean Stanley and to the late Lady Augusta Stanley for the tender sympathy shown by them to the mourners on this day, and also on Sunday, the 19th, when the Dean preached his beautiful funeral sermon. As during his life, Charles Dickens's fondness for air, light, and gay colors amounted almost to a passion, so when he lay dead in the home he had so dearly loved, these things were not forgotten. The pretty room opening into the conservatory, from which he had never been removed since his seizure, was kept bright with the most beautiful of all kinds of flowers, and flooded with the summer sun. And nothing stirred in the room. The old fashion, the fashion that came in with our first garments and will last unchanged until our race has run its course and the wide firmament is rolled up like a scroll, the old-fashioned death. Oh, thank God, all who see it, for that older fashion yet of immortality.